that's yet to be fully decided. 463. You know what you're going to do tomorrow? You know what you have planned, but you don't know what you're going to do. I don't know about tomorrow. I just live from day to day. I don't borrow from its sunshine, or its skies may turn to gray. I don't worry over the future, for I know what Jesus said. And today I walk beside him, for he knows what is ahead. Many things about tomorrow I don't seem to understand. But I know who was tomorrow, and I know who holds my hand. Every step is getting brighter as the golden stairs I climb. Every burden's getting lighter. Every cloud is silver light. There the sun is always shining. No fear will dim the eye. At the ending of the rain, where the mountains touch the sky. Many things about tomorrow I don't seem to understand, but I know who holds tomorrow, and I know who holds my hand. I don't know about tomorrow. It may bring me poverty, but the one who feeds the sparrow is the one who stands by me. And the path that be my portion may be through the flame or blood, but His presence goes before me, and I'm covered with His blood. Many things about tomorrow I don't seem to understand, but I know who holds tomorrow, and I know who holds my hand. It would be good to sing that one with a lot of confidence, wouldn't it? Pray for confidence. 569. Y'all help me on them higher notes. I have trouble getting there. Rise will meet His aid afford, never to fall, never to fall, while I find my precious Lord, sweeter than all, sweeter than all. Jesus is now and ever will be, sweeter than all the world to me. Since I heard His loving call, sweeter than all, sweeter than all. I can follow all the way, hearing Him call, finding Him from day to day, sweeter than all, sweeter than all. Jesus is now and ever will be, sweeter than all the world to me. since I heard his loving call. Sweeter than all, sweeter than all. When we reach the crystal sea, voices will call, but my Savior's voice will be sweeter than all, sweeter than all. Jesus is now and ever will be sweeter than all the world to me. Since I heard his loving call, sweeter than all, sweeter than all. And then hymn number. Which one did I give you next? Oh, land of rest for thee, I sigh, when will the moment come, when I shall in my armor abide and dwell in peace at home. We'll work till Jesus comes, we'll work till Jesus comes, we'll work till Jesus comes, and we'll be gathered home. Through Jesus Christ I fled for rest, he made me cease to roam, and lean for succor on his breast till he conduct me home. We'll work till Jesus comes, we'll work till Jesus comes, we'll work till Jesus comes, and we'll be gathered home. I sought at once my Savior's side no more, when death shall roam. With him I'll break death's chilling night and reach my heavenly home. We'll work till Jesus comes, we'll work till Jesus comes, we'll work till Jesus comes, and we'll be gathered home. The song after the message will be 926, 926.
I like that. Hey.
Nick. So anyway, Daniel chapter 11, we left off, and I kind of stuck some things backed up just a little bit, just for clarity. It's kind of hard sometimes to start in the middle or 3/4 into it, and keep this point going. We'll try to finish 11 and 12 tonight. I stuck this in there just more of a transition. How many know what a demigod is?
God hath given.
Pretty close. Yep. That's basically of it. How many demigods are on the earth right now? Well, they're not really gods, but people who think they're demigods. Let me change that. Well, he doesn't actually claim it. There's one over in North Korea that claims to be a demigod. Okay. That one just thinks he is, but, and he's probably not the only one. The reason I bring that up is because the more I read and the more that people have on this Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes, he actually thought he was a demigod. And that comes important when we look at these last verses to understand some of what is being said about him. And I caution how you look at this. I caution making absolute. Let me put it that way. Because when we get in part of it, according to whose commentary you pick up, it has to be this or it has to be that. And the truth is, it could be either. Now, I'll lean more one way than the other, but simply because what it says. But there are those, and I'm not moving, that hold this, that the last few verses is not about Antiochus. Now, went back to verse 33. And those of the people who understand shall instruct many, yet for many days they shall fall by the sword and flame, by captivity and plundering. Now, when they fall, they shall be aided with a little help, but many shall join with them by intrigue. And some of those of understanding shall fall to refine them, to purify them. And those of the people who understand, well, I was having help this morning. And some of those of understanding fall to refine them, purify them, and make them white until the time of the end, because it is still for the appointed time. Sometimes it gets a little difficult doing things, holding somebody with one hand and working with the other. And so that probably tells you who my helper was. So that point here, this is talking about Jews, people of the Jewish nation. And we have to understand, when Antiochus goes back and plunders it again and takes it, there is a point of understanding. And that point that they get a little help. What happens when God's people get persecuted? Well, we're going to go there, yeah. Here's the point. In that aspect, the chaff is separated from wheat. That's a good analogy. The wheat will give up, and those who have strength will hold on and encourage some of those who are looking for encouragement. And that's what it's talking about here. And the other point of it is, I like this last verse, and it's real important. Notice this: to refine them, purify them, and make them white until the time of the end, because it is still for the appointed time. What he is talking about, some of them are going to fall, some of them are going to die. And they've been faithful, they're going to be purified, going to make white, that point of cleansed as white, and they'll be there until the end. And notice this point that he said, but this, because it is still for the appointed time. That's very specific as to an appointed time. And that's what kind of makes getting this too far in the future going. But notice, we have a lot of verses about purification of the faithful. You go to Zechariah 13, verse 7, 9, and those people, and notice this. Notice how close that is to what is said Daniel. Those are the people who understand shall instruct many. Yet for many days they shall fall by sword and flame, by captivity and plundering. If you didn't know any better, wait a minute, that is not Zechariah. That is read Daniel again. I don't know what happened there. Let's turn to Zechariah because I had it. I don't know what happened to it. I copied it. That's way too close, Daniel, because that's not right. Chapter 7, or excuse me, chapter 13 and verse 7. Well, let's do it the old way. All right, there, okay. 13 verse 7. Awake a sword against my shepherd, against the man who is my companion, says the Lord of hosts. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. Then I will turn my hand against the little ones. And it shall come to pass in all the land, says the Lord, that 2/3 in it shall be cut off and die, but 1/3 shall be left in it. I will bring the 1/3 through the fire, will refine them as silver is refined, and test them as gold is tested. And they will call on my name, and I will answer them. I will say, this is my people, and each one will say, the Lord is my God. So you have this point of God using that as silver and gold is refined, so is his people refined. What is the purpose of tribulations? Why does God allow tribulations to fall upon us?
Yes. Prepare them to strengthen.
It tests those who it tests us all. Some won't come through it, others will. But then those that come through the testing will be strengthened. It'll help purify them. Get that idea of how they are to serve. And notice Paul similarly writes in 1 Corinthians 3, 11 through 15, for no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. And if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become clear. I always read that wood, hay, and stone, I think of the 3 little pigs. And it fits. It won't hold together. And that's what he says. One's work will become clear, for the day will declare it. What day? Judgment day. Because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test each one's work of what it is. What happens when you put wood, hay, and straw into a fire? It burns, it's consumed. Okay? What about gold, silver, precious stones? Mold made pure or hardened, that's what they end up usually being. If anyone's work which he has built on it endures, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss. But he himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. What does that mean, receive a reward or suffer loss? There is a
Judgment day, it's gonna be whatever reward or not that Christ gives.
okay. Here's a reality, and notice that last part. He himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. If he endures, and the work he's done, but the work he doesn't endure, what does he lose? I want you to think about this another way.
He doesn't lose anything other than this, the work that he did.
He doesn't lose the work that he did, he loses the result of that work. And I want you to understand and get this in mindset, because I think this is what Paul is trying to get us through, is if you see somebody you've been teaching and working with, and you see them at judgment, and they are saved, how you going to feel? I'm going to be happy. I'm going to have joy. Well, their emotions, the emotions we have are the same emotion God has. So I don't think we're losing our emotion. If I see somebody, and I believe this, I believe it firmly, so take it for what it's worth. If I know that person is being saved, I'm like, yes, that was worthwhile. Even if it was hard work, even if it was difficult. But the same thing is true. If I see somebody that I work with that didn't survive, or even in this life, see them fall away, if I really care about them, that's going to hurt. It's not going to affect my salvation, per se, but it's going to bother me. There's a reason God says, I'm going to wipe away every tear from every eye.
We struggle to understand that if we look around and somebody we love is not there. Now, I can't answer it. I don't know. But I'm confident God's going to take care of it.
I'm confident God's going to take care of it, but it's going to take care of it in that entering in. I truly believe at judgment, there are going to be a lot of tears, and I think some of those tears are going to be the Lord's. That's my thought.
Joy in heaven when somebody answers the call of Christ. So there's the emotions in heaven. And I can't say there not being some emotion in the judgment.
That's my deal. When you see that emotion, and God teaches us that there's that emotion, God gets angry. God shows love. God says, I take no pleasure in the death of the wicked.
We're adapting to something we can't see. It's clear we want to.
That's right, we're not. But if I look at me, if I take the time to look at me and know how I feel today, how's that going to be any different then? But somehow God's going to take care of it when we get up there. Okay? He said he will, and I trust he will. But there's that point Paul is making. If word to burn, he'll suffer loss, but he himself will be saved. Yet as those who it affects the one that does it somehow, though it doesn't take away from their salvation. And that's part of what we should understand. Okay. Now, we get into this point. But in their place, who? The place of those Israelites, faithful Israel, he shall honor a God of fortresses, and a God which his fathers did not know. He shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and pleasant things. Before we go further, whose representation did Antiochus put into the temple? Zeus. Who was Zeus according to Greek mythology?
Zeus and Jupiter. I'm not sure which one was Roman and which one was Greek. So they were the head guy.
They were the head guys, okay?
Jupiter was Roman. Antipas
actually believed that he was Zeus. Some of the writings I found. So when it says he shall honor a God of fortresses, Zeus was supposed to be the mighty God. A God which his fathers did not know. It's not saying that they did not know who Zeus was, but they did not know him as Zeus. Thus he shall act against the strong fortresses with a foreign God, which he shall acknowledge and advance its glory, and he shall cause him to rule over many and divide the land for gain. This is everything that he did at that time. He actually did those things. And here's where you get into some of the conclusion. You get into this part of the latter part, And I want to understand the point. He went to do this for himself. Now, Brother Kaufman says from here, you skip from what Daniel, or from this, it says, at the time of the end. Brother Kaufman says that you skip to the Antichrist. He holds that from this on, it is talking about the Antichrist. The lawless one of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Brother Daugherty holds that this still is about Antipas. And here is the problem you get into when you try to present this as the Antichrist. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, with many ships, and he shall enter the countries, overwhelm them, and pass through. This is the same king he's been talking about through the whole chapter. There's no indication that this is, other than that, at the time of the end, could be a future event. Now, for Daniel, it's a future event. He's actually speaking about when the time of the end comes for Antipas Epiphanes. And notice, he shall also enter the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these escape from his hand. Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. Also the Libyans and Ethiopians shall follow at his heels. When you get up to this point, and you talk about Edom and Moab and the host of the greater of Ammon, they actually align themselves with Antipas. So that fits. They joined in as an ally. Rather than to be conquered and resist him, hey, if you can't beat them, join them. Which they were famous for doing all along. Now notice, but news from the east and the north shall trouble him, therefore he shall go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many. So in this point here, it is talking about how that he's going to be split, which he did. He ended up going towards Syria, up toward India, because the trade route was cut off by the Parthians. And then he left, and I can't think of the guy's name, but he left a general to fight against the Maccabees. And notice, he shall plant the tents of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and no one will help him. So, let's go to a neutral. Neither Kaufman nor Daugherty. After restoring Meninus, Antipas IV issued decrees aimed at helping the most enthusiastically pro-Greek fraction of the Jews. You ever heard of something called the Hellenists? This is how they began. Who went against the traditionalists. He outlawed Jewish religious rites and traditions, and the Temple of Jerusalem was changed to a syncretic Greek-Jewish cult that included worship of Zeus. The Greek historian Dardarus wrote that Antipas sacrificed a great swine at the image of Moses, and that the altar of God that stood in the outward court, and sprinkled them with the blood of the sacrifice. He commanded likewise that the books by which they were taught to hate all other nations should be sprinkled with the broth made of the swine's flesh. And he put out the lamp, called by them immortal, which burns continually in the temple. Lastly, he forced the high priest and the other Jews to eat swine flesh. So you have this point, and it's a change from all his fathers had done. They had left off, when they conquered a nation, they left the religion intact. because he saw it as a rebellion, he changed it. Okay? He ends up, when the city of Jerusalem was sacked a second time in the disorder, Antiochus established a military Greek citadel called the Acra in Jerusalem to serve as a stronghold for the Hellenized Jews and a Greek military garrison. This happened from 1868 to 167 BC. This is what triggered the revolt with the Maccabees. Okay? Now, here is what is written in 2 Maccabees. And it talks about his death. But the all-seeing Lord, the God of Israel, struck him with an incurable and invisible blow. As soon as he stopped speaking, he was seized with a pain in his bowels, for which there was no relief, with sharp internal tortures that very justly, for he had tortured the bowels of others, and many had strange inflictions. Yet he did not in any way stop his insolence, but was even more filled with arrogance, breathing fire and his rage against the Jews, and giving orders to drive even faster. And so it came about that he fell out of his chariot as it was rushing along, and he fall so hard as to torture every limb of his body. Thus he only a little while before had thought his superhuman arrogance that he could command the waves of the sea, and then imagined that he would weigh the high mountains in a balance, was brought down to earth and carried in a litter, making the power of God manifest to all. And so the ungodly man's body swarmed with worms, and while he was still living in anguish and pain, his flesh rotted away, and because of the stench, the whole army felt revulsion at his decay. He literally began decaying before he died, according to 2 Maccabees. And that's what they're talking about when it says, he shall come to his end and no one will help him. No one can help him. No one could. Now, again, Brother Daugherty holds that this is completely about him. Brother Kaufman points to it being extreme in the future, about the lawless one of 2 Thessalonians. I'm not sure which it goes. I may have two slides. Oh, I left that actually in there. Then we get into chapter 12. I want you to notice this, at that time. So when you look at that time, that has to be at the time of whatever it's talking about and ending in chapter 11. So if it has to do with the lawless one, this has to do with it. If it has to do with Antiochus, this has to do with it. Some of it gets a little confusing at times. You have to really understand that literal versus figurative aspect of it. At that time, Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. Who is Daniel's people? The Jews. Here's one reason I don't lean toward Brother Kaufman. Now, Brother Kaufman will say that's over spiritual Israel, which would be Christians. It clearly says the sons of your people. Daniel has no idea who a Christian is. So you kind of have to keep that in mind. Not saying it's definitely this, but I'm just saying you got to keep that in mind. And know that there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. Here's why Brother Kaufman wants to go to the other extreme. Okay? Let me ask a question. Concerning Luke chapter 16. You have Abraham, Lazarus, the beggar, and the rich man. Which ones could we say are written in the book? Lazarus and Abraham. Yeah. So my point is, just because somebody dies, or just because it says they're written in the book, doesn't mean that this has to be to the point of the day of judgment. Okay? Know that many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. Okay? We talk about the dead sleeping. But Jesus said that God said, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He is the God of the living. The body sleeps. You go back to Luke chapter 16 and you see that Lazarus was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. Obviously knew everything that was going on. It says, the rich man awoke in torment. When we get up in the morning, and I notice that terminology right there, when we get up in the morning, we rise from our sleep. This could be very much figurative language. I'm not saying it definitely is, I'm saying it's something to keep in mind. My problem with both Brother Daugherty and Brother Kaufman is they take their point of view and it absolute. If you think anything else, in fact, Brother Kaufman says to think anything else is heresy. He calls it heresy. Sir.
He could still be talking about just the Jewish people because they would not, there would be a separation of the faithful from the unfaithful until Christ died. Once Christ died and that debt was paid all the way back, then the ones who were faithful would be everlasting life. The ones who were not faithful would be everlasting contempt. There wouldn't be that change until a death occurred, as it says in Romans, so that those under the first covenant would be saved.
I understand what you're saying. I understand from that viewpoint.
That's just speculating because of Lazarus being where he was in the bosom of Abraham, and we have that paradise thing, and then they're not going to come back to life.
No,
and blood flow backwards, and so it would save those that were faithful, and it would condemn those that weren't.
And I see what you're saying. I mean, make a thought to this when you do it.
So it would be at the cross. It wouldn't be a future event, the day of judgment.
Okay. I understand. And that would carry on. The thief was told by Jesus he would be with him in paradise. Most agree that's Abraham, but the same thing. Here's the thought, and people had asked me, what the thought, because the Hadean world is not destroyed until the day of judgment. Revelation chapter 20 bears that out. Okay? So, but here's the thought. If you're in paradise, what are you going to receive at the judgment?
We will receive the reward.
Okay? Everlasting life. It's going to be, I mean, even though you're already there, everlasting life is part of what you're already receiving. A part of it. If you're in torment, as the rich man said, you're in everlasting contentment. People have said to me, when you die, you realize, hey, you're either one or the other. Things are only going to get better or they're only going to get worse. And I understand your point, Ron. There's that thing about God. When you sit there and read God, and so many times he says about the saved, God was so sure of this thing was happening in my mindset that Christ was going to die on that cross, that when he saved, when those died in the Old Testament who were saved, they were saved right then. Because in his mind, he'd already seen the full picture.
Yeah, that's because we're trying to separate things into time, and God's already done it before the foundation of the world.
There we go.
So,
That kind of gets in that point of Hebrews where his rest. He's already read. To him, everything's completed.
yeah.
It's just that it has to play out for mankind.
Yeah, we try to separate it into time for our benefit, but it's already happened.
Right. And Paul uses some of this terminology. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. There is that point of brightness. Whose mindset do they shine like that in? In God's eyes.
That verse 2 is a tough one.
It is very tough.
My rendition here, NIV, multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake. Some who one some. It's hard to plug in what we see and understand.
Yeah. And is it that they are resurrected or that they awake in their...
They are asleep. They will awake.
And that's what I'm saying. You can go either way. Yeah, and that's what I'm not saying. What I'm saying is not absolute, is what I've tried to understand. Because if you put this, that it's either there's a resurrection for them or a resurrection for all people.
The commentator of mine said Daniel was simply saying that after the tribulation, many, both righteous and wicked, will be raised. Both will be raised. We will all be raised to the judgment.
So if you take it all the way to the judgment day, that's
That's the way they're taking it. They're
all the way to the judgment day.
in chapter 7.
And I'm not saying it can't be.
Because Peter said, no prophecy is of any private interpretation.
Yeah.
Since we don't have God telling us what this was, we only have secular writing. We don't know.
And the only thing that I keep going back to, that I keep thinking about that makes it harder for me, is that point that Jesus made, that the law and prophets were until John. I came to fulfill the law. So even your thought there of dying on the cross, taking care of this, could be part of it. Or there's a lot of different avenues that could be taken. And so, as you point out, since we don't have God saying this is exactly what it is, we come back, and my point is, I don't think anybody that has a reasonable explanation should be criticized.
Well, and what was this written, who was this written to and for? This was written to the Jews for that time period, because because they've been going now 400 years without any word from God. And so maybe it was or maybe it was to encourage them. It doesn't have any effect on us.
Right. And
But it was meant to encourage them to be looking for the Messiah.
and not just that, but even the things that they were going through, you gotta, your point of 400 years, it's gonna be 400 years that they don't have any talk. This is actually 400 years in the future. From the time it's being written, if you tie it to Antiquities.
And this is one of the first times resurrection is suggested in Scripture. Resurrection. Where God blessed something and being that when a resurrection from the dead was coming.
You know, even David, he said, when the child died, I can't bring him back, but I can go to him. So he knew there was a place that he was going to go. But did he understand that his body would be resurrected? I don't think so. Because the only thing he ever wrote about somebody being resurrected was Jesus himself. You shall not allow my soul to see corruption. And that would be a point that he didn't even die, be dead long enough for his body to start to decay. From the dead. Now that he believed. And that's the astonishing thing, because nowhere in Scripture was that indicated. And no miracle like that had been done at that time, as far as we know.
God, Abraham believed God could do anything, therefore, how he did. But mass resurrection wasn't.
Even that was more of a thought of, if I put Isaac to death and make him this offering and burn the body, how's God going to fulfill that promise he made me? And he said it was going to be through Isaac. So if it's going to be through Isaac, some way, somehow, he's got to be able to bring him back from the dead.
This is a mass resurrection.
Of some sort.
That's right.
Well, and this is right about when the Sadducees and the Pharisees divided into two groups. The Pharisees believed in the resurrection, and the
Sadducees didn't. Now,
And it seems like scholars, back on verse 1, when it refers to Michael, archangel, because it starts out with him, and that first sentence of him standing and overlooking. I see that that's where they take off on it, because he is looking over this event that's taking place. And so they lead that into the fact that this is the resurrection, this is the second coming, this is that end day, because Michael's there.
but if you go back to chapter 10, Michael's there. And notice the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. Here comes the point that, and as you're speaking, I'm thinking about this. Who's going to lead the resurrection of the final day? Lead it. Lead it. Christ will be leading it. So, I understand your point. So many get into it and go that direction. My thought is, be careful which way you go. And really, Ron makes a point. It doesn't have any bearing on us.
No, it doesn't.
And so,
It was to give those people at that time some kind of information.
information and hope. You get down the last verse, and we're probably going to start back here next week. So we're not going to get too bogged in it next week.
This is not too far from what we read in Thessalonians, where it tells us the dead in Christ shall rise first.
You're right. That's
Similar language.
It's similar language, but is it the same event? And the question is, can it be figurative?
Well, I don't know.
But that's all I'm saying. Now, I want to point this out. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Daniel, in shutting up the words and sealing the book, It's not so much not letting people read it, it's protecting it. Why do you put a seal on something? Huh? Part of it stop people reading. Ray, what did you say? Okay. When you say, I thought you did, I'm caught up. Who knows? It might be one of the other voices in my head speaking. When you put a seal on a truck, it is to protect the contents. Sealing this book is protecting the contents until that time of which it is to be opened. I think that's what he's talking about here. And I will go ahead and tell you, this point of fro and knowledge shall increase, and the next point, Brother Kaufman talks about our century, the knowledge of medicine and all the different things that have come about. And it says, surely we must be nearing the end. Well, here's reality. Are we closer to the end of time than Daniel was? Can we say that that end of time is not going to be any longer for us than it is for Daniel at this point? That the distance between now and the end of time any greater or less than what it was from Daniel to now? That's it, length of our life. So we don't know when that end of the world's coming, and to make a speculation like that, surely we're nearing the end because of the knowledge increase. Yeah, we've learned a lot over the last 100 years. But
you remember the apostles thought Jesus was coming back right then.
yeah.
And they thought they were very close to the end time.
So much so that Paul had to write to the Thessalonians, if a man won't work, neither shall he eat, because that's exactly what some of the Christians were doing. They're like, well, let the church say he's coming back any day. Why should I be working a secular job?
In reality, Christian has been thinking that Christ is going to come at any time.
And he could come at any time.
Look at it.
Right. He can come anytime. And he might come for me tomorrow and not come to you for you till
Whenever your time is up, it's up.
if you know, Ray, what did you say you were almost 98? My daughter told me the other day that I have to live till I'm 93. But she didn't say that. What she said was I have to live till when it's 30, which would make me 93. And I'm like, I got no say so in that, and neither do you. But I hope you're right. I wouldn't mind being like Joseph and mounting some great grandchildren on my knee. But that's what it comes back to. And that's the thought that I want to point out is, if I die tonight, and even though I'm not going to face the final judgment day, I'm going to rise to something that's everlasting. Either life or contempt and shame. And I want you to think about this point.
Whatever we move into is everlasting.
Right. And that's my point. But I want you to think about this point. A non-believer can die, and they're going to have contempt. They're going to have some shame. But it's not going to be near as great as somebody who fell away. And the previous verses, we're talking about those who stayed faithful in the previous chapter. And we have to remember, Daniel didn't say, okay, chapter 12. He flowed from one to the other. And those who fell away, when they die, knowing that they should have stayed faithful, that's a greater shame. So much so that Peter would say, the dog has turned to his own vomit, and a sow, after being washed, returned to the mire. And it would be better if they had never known the way of truth than to have known it and turned away. Let's stand and sing.
Let's just sing the first verse. Act 26.
Jesus is standing in Pilate's hall, friendless, forsaken, betrayed by all. Hearken what meaneth the sudden call. What will you do with Jesus? What will you do with Jesus, my friend? Neutral you cannot be. Someday your heart will be asking, oh friend, what will he do with me?
Mike, would you lead us